I have seen a canyon go from a trickle to 10 to 15 or even a wall of 20 feet of water. It's scary, and it does happen all the time in the deserts. Hey everybody, I'm Les Stroud, also known as Survivorman, and for well over 35 years, I've been studying, training, and teaching survival throughout the world. Today we're going to take a look at desert survival scenes in the movies and in television and judge just how real they are. Showing the difference between the sunny sky that you're in and the sandstorm overtaking that as a big dark cloud, to me, is very realistic. It is blocking out all of the light. It's what happens when we have smog and smoke from fires. Things get dark. They are getting them right. The sandstorm happens incredibly quickly. Think about when a hurricane comes in or a tornado comes in. It's the same thing with sand. You can have the same wind speeds, and this is a wall of sand, and it's coming in at you, and it's coming in fast. Tom here puts on some glasses and a makeshift scarf that he steals as he's running through the market. You do what you've got to do, and that is actually the key to survival. It's not about what's better or what's best or what's not as good. What is working right now? And for this character, he was lucky to have goggles, and he covered his face any way he could. Your air intake on your vehicle is going to be sucking up all that sand, and it's going to choke out your engine in your vehicle. So that, I think, is the harsher reality of trying to drive in the middle of a sandstorm. I'd rate this clip a 6 out of 10 because the depiction of the moving sand truthfully captured what you might actually see. That is not the way that I would travel through the desert on any given day. Just traipsing up a sand dune, back down it, along the ridges. Those dunes can be easily the size of apartment complexes or city towers. They can be massive. It is difficult to walk on sand dunes. It's like walking in some kind of weird snow. You just, every step forward is a slide back. And the trick in traversing the sand dunes really is looking for that path of least resistance, which is not always going all the way up to the top. The beauty of most wilderness areas, whether it's the ocean or the middle of a desert, is that star expanse. And it is far more illuminating than you'd ever give it credit for. You can literally walk in the night through the desert and see exactly where you're going without any moon, just with the starlight. If you can't do it at night and you need some daylight, fine. Early in the morning, that's going to be your best bet. Once you get to mid-morning and even late day, it's just too hot. The tripping and the stumbling when it comes to all of our favorite heroes and actors as they try to walk on sand dunes, that's all Hollywood. You don't succumb that way. And then if you do trip and fall, you don't just go rolling on down a big dune like that. You do that if you want to. You make a sport out of it. It's a recreational activity. But if you're succumbing, that's not the way it happens. I'd rate this clip at 3 out of 10. 3 because it's just kind of silly. I'm not really certain they got it right at all. And the reason for that is quicksand primarily exists at riverbeds, estuaries, close to the ocean. That's where you get your quicksand. This particular scene is set right in the middle of the desert, where everything is completely bone dry, and yet he just drops into it kind of magically. That stuff is so thick. You're not just lifting your arm up saying, "Oh, let me die. Just leave me here." That's not happening. Not when he was already up to his neck and just barely sort of breathing. My first move in falling into quicksand is immediate, and that is this, real simple. Don't panic. That's the first thing you do. When you can't move your body, insane, intense claustrophobia, because you can't move. It's like you're tied. So you have to breathe and not panic, and then think about, okay, how do I slowly and cautiously get my body back from being vertical to being horizontal and slither my way out of this. And you end up using, it's like your fingers become like little grappling hooks. You just want to do this. It's literally an inch at a time. Even to pull somebody else out requires a lot of leverage. In this case, he had a horse, so he had the leverage. Falling into quicksand can be a very slow death. If you really can't pull yourself out from all that suction, it doesn't mean you're also going straight down instantly. People have been stuck in quicksand for minutes, for hours, and even days. It can take a while. I'd give this scene about a 3 out of a 10. It's the wrong ecosystem. His portrayal being stuck in the sand was just a little too over the top. The thing I love so much about this movie and this particular scene is the realism of his desperate attempt to get a little bit of rainwater with his water bottle. He's holding it up, trying to get these drops. And that feeling, I know, that feeling of dehydration where just a bit of rain would give me some relief. Flash flooding in the desert is not to be underestimated. It's incredibly dangerous. It happens very quickly. You're rarely prepared for it. And I have seen a canyon go from a trickle to 10 to 15 or even a wall of 20 feet of water in a very short period of time. And when I say short period of time, I don't mean days. I mean hours or minutes. It's scary, and it does happen all the time in the deserts. The way to prepare for flash flooding is knowledge ahead of time. What's going on with the weather outside of the area you are in? Because the flash flooding doesn't occur, usually, from the rain that you're standing in that moment. It happens miles away in some kind of thunderstorm that's going on in a mountain range. It all gathers and starts coming down through all these creeks and cracks and crevices to be right where you are, and that's why it ends up being a wall of water when it's coming at you. I'd rate this scene 9 out of a 10. The depiction of the rapid flooding and his desperation in the beginning of that to just try to get a few little drops of water, I thought was spot on.
I mean, shouldn't we keep walking? It's cooler at night.
Mike in this scene is trying to create a solar still. In my opinion, he's doing it really badly. The concept of a solar still is that you encase materials such as plants, or even you could have salt water from an ocean, and then you cover it over in the heat of the sun, and you have a cup there, and you have this taut material across the top with a weight in the middle, and then you get the condensation on the underside of that tarp. It trickles along, hits the center, drips down into the cup. It's very, very difficult. It's very time-consuming, and the reality is, in this scene, they do it just before nightfall. It doesn't work at night. It's something that has to happen during the day in the sun. So that's why, they're not getting a pass on this particular scene. They did it wrong. I've done it exactly like the scene that they show here. I've done it at the edge of the ocean on many occasions. And after 24 hours, I maybe have collected an ounce at best in perfect conditions.
I'd go easy on that.
When it comes to conserving water in the desert, the reality is you can't. And so if you only have a limited amount, the best thing you can do is actually consume it and carry it in your bladder rather than trying to ration little tiny amounts of water. Rationing food is one thing. Rationing water is something else altogether. If you have copious amounts of water, then great. Ration it out, plan it out. You can last without food for about 10 days, but in the case of water, you're good for about 3 days. After 3 days, you can't function. So the urine question. I know that there are certain survivalists who have said, oh, it works, it works. The way it works, first of all, is primarily psychological. So it's a matter of you're putting liquid in your mouth. But you have to remember all of those toxins that are coming out of your body are coming out often through your urine. So you're toxifying your own self when you ingest it. Secondly, and this is an important point here, when films and many survival shows want to portray drinking your own urine, you look at what they've collected, and they're peeing like a racehorse. When you're dehydrated, you dribble, and it's tawny brown.
I got 2 of these. You want one?
No, thanks.
Gets cold fast.
This is the paradox of the desert, that you can freeze to death, and that's going to be at night. So during the day, it's insanely hot, and so the heat just dissipates very quickly, and it gets very, very cold, to the point of frost on the ground. I don't want to underestimate the value of a space blanket. They do serve a purpose. They can literally save a life. They can be warm. I've found the better way to use them is to actually create them into a shelter. And if you create a shelter and use it that way and then crawl in, I found that actually works better than trying to wrap it around my body when they're all crinkly. And the type that you want to have is the type that you can't tear. The ones I see Mike and Saul using, you could rip them open accidentally just by stepping on them the wrong way. I'm going to give these survival clips a 5 out of 10. They showed a lot of cool things to do. Solar still. They brought up the concept of drinking your own urine. When you're in the expanse of any desert and all you want is a break from the sun, then anything is a break. It's incredible the difference in temperature from being under a few slats of wood or being out in the sun. That difference can be massive. Finding a safe place to sleep in the desert is really going to be a matter of options. You go with the best option you can come up with. If you can make a grass mat and sleep on that, you do that. If you can be on a rock outcropping that is smooth and comfortable, as much as rocks can be comfortable, but it was heated during the day, then you do that. The thing that you don't really have to worry about so much are the creepy crawlies. To some extent. It doesn't mean that a scorpion might not go up your pant leg. When I'm sleeping in the desert, if I take my boots off, I hang them upside down, or I put them on a stick upside down so that I don't have scorpions going up in them. If I have my pant legs and they're loose, I'll tuck them in with my socks so nothing goes in my pant legs. He was supposed to be asleep, but he was holding his hands in front of the chest. You don't do that while you're sleeping.
There's bugs. That must mean there's water.
When you start to see any kind of life, insect life, wildlife, plant life, it usually indicates there's got to be water somewhere. That's where they all survive themselves. The insects, the creepy crawlies, the flying birds, the walking mammals. The other thing you look for in the desert, it's simply plant life. Growth, trees, greenery. And generally speaking, the landscape is brown and gray and dry, but you see a little bit of greenery over there, that's the place to go and check for water.
There we go.
This is absolutely a place you could find water. I have found the cleanest water to drink halfway up a mini mountain in the middle of a Mexican desert. And I could plunge down into it and drink it, and it's safe. Sometimes that's because it's a rain catch, and sometimes it's because it's bubbling up as a spring from the ground. The problem with water is that people are quite afraid of it, to the point where they won't drink and they'll become dehydrated. But the reality is that most of the places we're going to be is going to have water that, in the worst case scenario, has Giardia. And Giardia is a waterborne parasite. You aren't going to feel it for 7 days, and then when you do, you take some pills and it's gone. And so that fear of, is water safe to drink, unfortunately is over pushed in the face of dying from dehydration, which is much worse. I'd rate this scene about an 8 out of 10. As far as the clothing you're going to wear when you're in the desert, the opposite of what you might think is what is the reality. In fact, more clothing is better. And the reason for that is convection. In a dry desert wind, all of the moisture is sucked out of your body. And it's actually your clothing that can keep that in. Same thing for the head. Sunburn, you can be scorched pretty quickly in the desert. So covering your head and covering your body is actually a real good idea in the desert. I think that caves are so overplayed when it comes to survival because most of the time caves are dank, they're damp, they're musty, they're filled with creepy crawlies. The floors are jagged and rocky. There's no place to sit, let alone lie down. So we often get this beautiful Hollywood image of a cave for surviving in. Those caves are few and far between. The wet ones that are not appealing at all when it comes to survival are much more common. There are a lot of caves in certain areas of the desert that are quite nice to survive in. The thing that you have to worry about sometimes in caves, actually, and strangely, is what you're breathing in. Because there are an awful lot of rodents that hang out in caves. And those rodents, such as mice that might carry hantavirus, are pooping. And when they poop, you're breathing in all that dust and that manure or bat guano. And that can knock you down really quickly if you get a real bad lung infection. I'd rate this scene a 3. It's pretty hard to judge a scene that is based on so much fiction. The way he catches the lizard in this scene is a little unrealistic. The reality is lizards are quite fast. They don't amble about. The proper way to get a lizard is with what we call a switch, where you have a long stick and you sort of whack it like that, and you really want to dispatch the creature before you go down and pick it up and take it off and eat it. There are a lot of creatures that you can eat in the desert, but you do need to know which ones are poisonous or not. When it comes to something like desert insects, is it brightly colored? Is it, advertising to you that, hey, I'm poisonous, look at all my fancy colors? Is it moving along slowly along the sand like it doesn't care about anybody? Why is it doing that? Probably because it's poisonous, and most of the other creatures know, yeah, don't eat that guy. That slow-moving millipede, he's poisonous. These are methods of learning about the insects or even the plants, for example, and figuring out whether or not something is poisonous or edible.
During the hot summers, we used to suck on small stones like these. Made us feel less thirsty.
If you pick up a stone and you suck on it, it has a way of stimulating saliva to be produced in your mouth, and that's what you want. And so it's not doing much of anything for your actual physiological dehydration, but psychologically, it's a great help. It's so cliche that in the desert, people always just fall face first. Most of the time, what we do is we go, oh, I gotta sit down. And then we sit down, and I'm feeling woozy, and then we faint. But of course, Hollywood's gotta make it happen within 4 seconds, so we fall face first. I'd rate this scene an 8 out of 10.
Ain't no use there, kid.
With every survival book you read, they show an image of somebody digging down in the desert to get water. I've tried it so many times, and I've never found water yet. You got to remember, when it comes to desert survival, you always have to weigh the effort you put into something against the something you're going to get.
Only water we're gonna get's right over here. It ain't the best water, and it'll take time.
Here we go, the barrel cactus trick. Once again, we look at a survival cliche when it comes to the barrel cactus, that you can get water out of a barrel cactus. Yes or no? Well, the answer is yes, you can.
There's only one species of barrel cactus that is somewhat safe for humans to drink from, the fishhook barrel cactus. Other species of barrel cactus are somewhat toxic and can cause diarrhea.
The reality is that if you do it right away, it's awful. It's terrible tasting. But what this character gets right is that it isn't going to taste great, and it's going to take a long time. That is the reality of a barrel cactus. People think you can just cut it open and start drinking. That's not the way it works. It takes a long time to get water out of a barrel cactus because the water's not just readily available just there in a pool. It's water within the fibers of the plant itself. And I've done it where I've squeezed it into my mouth, drops at a time, and even that does not taste good. But it can keep you alive. I'd rate this clip 8 out of 10. I would say my favorite desert survival scene was Better Call Saul. Not because they got it right. What they did, they didn't get right. But it was almost like one of my own shows where they were showing you examples of what you could do and should do to survive. They didn't do it well, but they were still showing them. Hey, if you like this video, then click on the next one.